Today's discussion surrounds the business challenge of choosing between bundled and a la carte software. In many cases, this discussion surfaces where businesses are attempting to mitigate the challenges brought on by shadow IT. Staff are collaborating, they're sharing, they're creating corporate data on multiple platforms. And joining me to discuss this is a panel of experts that encounter this question quite a lot. And to start, we have Global Head of Solutions at Google for Google Cloud Platform is Miles Ward. We have Associate Director of IT for North America at Essence, Colin McCarthy, and Customer Success Manager at Cumulo, Dave Kaminsky. My apologies. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
It's good to be here.
Really looking forward to it.
Excellent. And just as a little substance, the reason why I wrote a la carte software instead of single application or instead of bundled or packaged applications is I did a lot of different searches trying to figure out what are people calling this question, because it comes up a lot when we're talking to businesses. When I work with different individuals, whether they're business owners or business executives, they ask me about, do I go with the suite of applications or what's the best application out there for this? And it's kind of hard to find a really good common way for people to, I guess, search for that specific question. The most accurate result I could get from a Google search was a la carte and bundled. Those seem to be the two that I was able to get together the most. So when we talk about a la carte and bundled, bear in mind that I'm also talking about a suite of applications versus a single application as well. You can look at it in the same frame of mind if that helps you. Okay? So to get this conversation started, I'm going to ask everyone, I'm going to start with Colin, to just take a moment to highlight one example of where you've seen either a la carte or bundled application suites to be a better business fit for something you were looking for.
For us personally, we've utilized both models. We fully embraced Google Apps for Work, and we buy that as a complete bundle, and we use the entire suite of applications. And now we've also started to utilize Office 365, and have found that the little nibbles of technology that we can get from Microsoft to play with and experiment and then implement into our business, and then dealing with new clients and customers. We've then been able to talk to Microsoft and find other bits of technology that we can then plug in. We're on a Hangout now, but not every company uses Hangouts or Google Chat. So for a lot of our customers, we've started to use Skype for Business, and the small adoption. We didn't have to buy the entire suite of everything that you can plug in to Skype for Business, or Link as it used to be called. And I had a conversation with Microsoft today about how can I tie in cloud telephony, and how can I tie in PSTN, old telephone conference call numbers into our Skype for Business. So for us, it's allowed us to be very agile and play and experiment, and provide the services that the business needs as our needs grow.
Interesting. Okay, so kind of almost a combination of both applications, both Microsoft and Google together has sort of merged together into one solution for your organization.
Yes, yeah, and it allows for different teams and in different offices and different departments to maybe use and start adopting different tools for the clients that they're working with. People might not everybody is using a Microsoft device or an Android phone, so it allows us also to be device independent as well, and give people the tools with the way that they want to work.
Interesting. Dave, how about you?
So, it's again somewhat similar to Colin. I've had a mix of experiences where places I've worked or clients I've had have gone all bundled or all standalone or a good hybrid mixture of them. Like a kind of a good example where hybrid really seems to be the best fit is when you have very task-specific workflows, like in a media and entertainment shop or a post-production house, where you have artists who are very specialized on a single craft, editing video, doing color correction, chroma key, whatever it is, they only need that one application for their task. And then further up the process workflow, you have someone who's doing review and minor correction who might need the whole Adobe suite. And on the flip side, I've actually also seen where workflows where people had the entire CS suite, but then you have Bob the intern, who really his only job is to apply branding to an image or a bug brand to video. So getting him even Photoshop is overkill. And getting something like Pixelmator off the App Store, which is compatible with the big CS Photoshop component, for $49 fits the need, is cheaper, and then if Bob the intern goes bye-bye, that license, if you're using license management, MDM, whatever you want to call it at these points, becomes transferable to the next guy.
Excellent. That's really that. I think Bob the intern is a really good use case, an example of how many organizations are looking at this question.
Sure.
Hey, Miles, how about you?
Well, so as a place, working at a place where we have, our own sets of bundled services, I certainly have to say that working, I work every day with the Google Apps Suite, and the integration of those services together is a real benefit to the workflows that I'm trying to support. But one of the places that I think we're looking at individualized applications is when you're able to see, really radical performance differences between those kinds of systems. Now, I think for individual workers, you can imagine, if you want to use the Photoshop example, like the performance of an intern on Photoshop versus the more specialized tool may actually be upside down. It might be slower for him to use something that's a professional grade application instead of one that only has the functions that are required for his task. But especially when you're talking about data and data analysis, as these tool sets expand into business intelligence and analytics, the performance differences between approaches for doing this kind of work are not like 10 or 15% or 20 or 30%. They're like thousands and thousands of percent. And so feeling like you're tied to a platform for your analytics measures, where that's kind of bundled into the system, you may be either paying an incredible amount to get the performance that you need, or just totally crippled in your ability to get the data out that you want. So I think that's one of the places where we're seeing a lot of customers sort of break out of their bundles, is trying to figure out how to use the data that their tools manufacture.
That's really interesting, and that actually brings me up to the next point, where it sounds like most of the use cases that were just given started with, okay, well, this is what we need, because this is what it seems that most companies in our situation use. And then after time evolves, you start to go, well, you know what, it'd be really great if we could do X, or really great if we could do this. And it makes me question whether or not, what are some of the more common mistakes that occur when people are making these decisions to move forward with either application suites or a single application? And I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts on that. Especially, I know, Miles, you brought up analytics, for example, that, okay, well, this is doing great, but I'm really looking for something else to accommodate this, and maybe it's really expensive to get what I need from what I have today, and so on.
Sure. I think, especially as you move to buying groups of services or buying bundles or deploying on platforms, you have to take a broader look at the innovation history of the provider that you're purchasing from, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we are entering a period of time where the rate of change for your average business is only increasing, and increasing at a rather sort of startling pace. And if you expect that your needs for your tools will remain static, then I have a floppy drive full of software for you. Right, and the result is that you've got to imagine that you're not just buying, the tool systems that you need today, but a path toward the tools that you need tomorrow. And so you've got to hear a story from your vendor that they're on that ride, that they're continuing to invest, that they don't think that they're done, that they've got a rich laundry list of features ahead, and to hold them to accountable to being able to deliver the innovation that you need for your workload.
Yeah, I can fully agree with that. With a couple of the cloud providers that we've taken on board and worked with, before we've signed up, it's like, talk to me honestly and candidly, show me what your roadmap is, tell me where you're going. These are the key features that I would like in your product that you don't currently have. When do you think you're going to be implementing them? What's your alpha program like? What's the beta program like? Can I get involved? How can I be, in sort of included in focus groups? How can we work with you directly so that, we're being selfish in a little way by helping you, sort of fine tune, your product to help us, which is, more than likely going to be helping other customers, as well.
So, in terms of my past experiences, one of the big mistakes that businesses often make, and this is small businesses, big businesses alike, is failure to separate user preference from actual business need and business use case. Give you an example. I prefer Google Apps. I love Google Apps, but if there is some feature that's not there, no offense, Miles, that my business requires, I have to look at other things, no matter what my preference is. And Microsoft Office is a great example of that. People are comfortable with Office, people who have used it for a long time, and I've literally seen organizations spend tenfold what they had to spend versus going with a different tool like Google Apps, Quip, even the tools that come with a Mac like Keynote and Pages. So separating that preference from the requirement has to be something that's front and center during an initial discovery. One of the other ones, quite frankly, is the ability to automate. Automation saves time, saves money, even on end-user applications. Google Apps Script is a great example of that. So our basic macros in Microsoft Office, if you're looking at a third tool compared to the two I've just mentioned, and there's no automation or ability to automate, you really need to assess that third option you're looking at, because as your business gets more sophisticated and wants to get more efficient in its workflows, you may have painted yourself into a corner. The other big mistake that I've seen, quite frankly, and this is more the medium to large-scale businesses or large enterprises, is can you effectively train your staff in an ongoing basis after your deployment? Google Apps, Microsoft, Big Bang, Go Live, whatever it is, you get trainers in to train your entire staff for that week. You go out of pocket on that. But then 6 months later, you're onboarding Jill the accountant and Sam the sales exec, and no one in-house knows how to explain how to use these things. So those have to be part of the decision-making process.
Following on from your bit about automation, the thing that we've looked at and look at very, very closely is the account provisioning and deprovisioning process. Do you do SAML? Do you do Google Apps Authentication? We were spent a lot of time talking to one company, and they showed us, their front end and their back end, and it looked great. And we had a few webinars with them, and then it came down to the question: is okay, how can we integrate you into our network? We don't have Active Directory. We run on LDAP, but most people utilize, Google Apps for our single sign-on. Do you do Google OAuth? And they're like, no, we don't. It's like, well, why not? You've just built a new cloud application. Why hasn't it got Google OAuth? Why hasn't it got SAML? And all of a sudden that's a big red herring. Because their option was, well, you can do an export of your LDAP database, and then you can upload it once a week. And it's like, no, goodbye, thank you.
Interesting. Now, it seems like you guys are tapping on something that I've come across a lot too, which is during this evaluation process. It seems that you're designing a success criteria of what it is that you're trying to accomplish for whatever X may be, right? And you have some solutions in mind, and you're testing and asking. Now, a big question that came up while listening to what all the examples you're giving is, okay, you have all this different criteria that is a must-have. Whereas at the same time, you're trying to solve a problem where that your staff is facing to a certain extent. And I guess a question that I'm wondering about is, shadow IT is something that's certainly always growing, right? So how do you, in your experiences or thoughts, have a plan that can say, how do I build this success criteria, find the right solutions, and find the solution before my staff just goes rogue and just downloads something and does something on their own that I have no administrative capability, no functionality whatsoever, no permissioning that I have any knowledge of whatsoever. And it seems like those two mash against each other quite a bit.
Yeah, they kind of do. And part of the problem as a technologist, is actually psychological from the user side. I don't want to go to my IT guy and tell him I need this thing, because then he's just going to pull out of a drawer something that he thinks fits my needs, and not actually what I need. So what I've experienced in good, healthy IT organizations, or organizations with a good, healthy IT department, it's not I have one problem I need to solve. It's I have an ongoing relationship with an audience that I need to stay engaged with, ask them on a regular basis what's missing from your tool belt, or what tool is getting rusty and showing its age. And that conversation really needs to continue in an ongoing and meaningful way where your users no longer think like, oh, IT's not listening. They now know IT is really interested in what I do, not as Big Brother, but to enable me to make whatever product we produce or service we give better. Now, in terms of like the behind-the-scenes enterprise platforms that users don't directly interact with normally, like video transcode systems, archival and backup, really, then it's a very narrow audience. Maybe for backup, it's your corporate risk assessment team, and you have to have the conversation with them about, the problem that we have is right now we have too much risk with an on-site backup solution. So we want to look at cloud-derived, whether it's something we build in Compute Engine or using Amazon's Glacier or whatever it is. Explaining what the options are clearly and simply to them, and not just handing them literature, really helps those business partners who are setting criteria and requirements for IT establish good criteria and requirements. Otherwise, they're just going, well, it must be more fault tolerant, and not defining what more fault tolerant means.
Yeah, IT does need to be, I guess, a lot softer, more friendlier face than we once were, and we need to be a lot more socially aware and welcoming. And I know that I always like to say no, but really you should say, instead of having that automatic no, be maybe I'll think about it. And with the the proliferation of shadow IT, it's it was so much easier in the olden days where somebody says I need a word processor, boom, you've got Microsoft Word. I need a project management application, boom, you've got MS Project. But now we've tried to look at doing an online project management application, but there's like 10 different versions, and of course everybody is starting to play around with them, and one group want this version, one group wants to use Trello, another group wants to use Slack, other people using Smartsheet, other people using projects.tm. There are just so many out there, and I think you just really need to you can't be a dictator anymore. You have to, which I can see a lot of people smiling and nodding. So probably they had flashbacks of the good old days of dictatorship. You have to be a lot more fluid, and but it's very difficult staying on top of it. And it's a huge worry. In fact, every IT person that I've spoken to probably has nightmares daily, even hourly, about shadow IT.
Well, I, for one, welcome our IT overlords, and I can tell you that it is an incredibly complex position to be in IT today, where what you compete against is the fully incentivized sales force of your average SaaS application vendor, right? Like, talk about a difference in experience. You got like random, line of business implementer trying to get their thing done. They've made a formal budget request to do XYZ, and they've got a credit card that does reimbursements, and a lot of these products cost less than books, right? I mean, that is a material component of early AWS adoption, was people thinking that they were outsourcing books, because you have this challenge where I think in the experience of many line of business owners, IT is a cost center of the business, is a constrained operator in the business, isn't seen as a strategic differentiator, a source of the innovative drive that enables companies to profit and build new business units. And as a result, like, of course they don't have the access to the same kinds of motivated, customer first, workload centric engagement people that are the heart of what makes these kinds of SaaS applications successful in a shadow IT context. So the only hope there is to actively find those the sort of disruptors and innovators inside of your business that are so pissed at the current state of affairs that they're willing to go through the headache and the risk of going out and buying something else and making it work on their own, and buy those people a cookie and sit with them for a long time and say, hey, I'd like to invite you to our innovation council. You're going to come be a part of figuring out how we get the right tools in front of everybody. And they go, well, that sounds like work. And you're like, yep, we're at work today. Right? So that like harnessing that energy, getting in front of the right tools, and not ignoring those participants, because there's absolutely places where the status quo of infrastructure is a train wreck, right? Like I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday. He used the best metaphor that I've heard yet. He was like, I was like, how are the systems over there? He's like, it's a tire fire. I'm like, oh okay, rad. So that, like, thinking through places where maybe the signals from folks that are in shadow IT might not all be things that you want to take on, because clearly they're being targeted by sales folks, but if you've got enough folks that are concerned that they're regularly and systematically selecting the same external vendors to solve the same burning problem inside your business, that might be worth more than a double check.
Yeah. And to kind of follow up on what Miles was just saying about more than a double check, a good practice that I suggest, especially around small, medium shops or businesses where there's a little more freedom for the end user, run that software audit very regularly, and not for the shaking the stick about violating license, or it's really to see what tools have your users installed on their own, and is there a pattern to it. A great example, from my past, the company I worked at prior to where I'm at now originally was an Internet Explorer only shop, and users were very angry about that, and were very passionate in debating that with IT, but no one really surveyed the land to see just how wild of a fire, in terms of the analogy, Firefox and Chrome and other browsers were in the wild within the office. And lo and behold, 2/3 were using Firefox and Chrome. And then a smaller segment were just using one or the other and hadn't opened IE unless they were using it for a business application that only worked with IE. And what that really told us was, okay, those ActiveX controls that we've become addicted to as developers, we have to stop using those, because that limits our users from using the tool they prefer that has no risk associated with it.
Interesting. So it's almost sounds as if, and Miles, sorry, you were about to speak. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll tell a fun story, right? I built a SaaS data business before I worked at Google, and one of our earliest customers, this is in 2009, was still hard locked as a corporation on Internet Explorer 5. So This puts them. I mean, like you're at a point where you're talking like Java won't run kind of thing, right? So we're trying to build using brand new shiny tech from the web like JavaScript, like any of it, and none of it worked. So now think about this. My application costs $100,000 a month, and the business unit owners are more than happy to pay our price. So does it cost me anything to hand them brand new MacBooks? Nope. Don't care. Are they really excited now to use my product because I just gave them the shiniest hardware that they're never, ever going to get from their IT department? Sure. Is it like the amount of, like what before was a tchotchke I'll give you, or a free dinner or something like that, like the cost of some of these systems is substantial enough that your employees are going to get access to anything that they want to get access to if these businesses are smart about it.
Yeah, I think there's also, I guess, with a lot of the younger workforce, there's always the mentality of praying for forgiveness rather than asking for permission. So, and if you are a young mobile company, you're not a stuffy old insurance company or bank, and apologies to any stuffy old insurance companies and banks that are watching. But if you are, one of those younger sort of startup companies, there is that everybody does tinker. People have got a Raspberry Pi. They're used to taking things apart. They're used to, playing and reinventing. So yeah, it keeps me up at night. I know Shadow IT does, and it's a worry.
Interesting. It seems that the theme that I'm pulling from all these different stories is enablement, right? So it's not necessarily freeing everyone to just make choices as they want, which could be dangerous, and there's that concern with Shadow IT, but to all the examples I heard, it sounds like finding those key people that are raising their hands or stomping their fists and saying, this sucks, right? And, okay, great. Tell me why. Work with me. You should join this. Let's work together, and, you're going to develop my success criteria for me, and you're going to work with me to, make sure that the rest of the staff that feels just like you're going to be that voice, and you're going to help us identify what it is that we're going to solve together as a company, rather than you continuing to just be frustrated, unproductive, inefficient, and downloading things that may or may not harm our corporate data.
Yeah, and it comes to a lot of education. You've got to let your users know that you can play, you can test things, but be sensible. Come and talk to us. Don't just Google Safari download, because the top download link is actually a malware site rather than Apple's official download repository. So it's just a lot of it comes with sort of education, and also as IT investing in auditing systems. If you've got Google Apps for work using something like Better Cloud, and running an app audit and see what is tying in, connecting into your Google Apps accounts, and then approving or denying stuff. Having internal pen testing on your devices.
And to what Colin was just saying about try and encourage the conversation first. In a past life, one thing I had done was officially blessed people to be mad scientists for their department and to run against the grain. So if everyone was using Visio and they wanted to experiment, they had to be committed to the experiment and actually turn in their Visio license. So for a week, they would use Smartsheets and then have to do like a one-paragraph write-up, a little thing to just codify what that experience was and actually make it usable data that if we are going to look at a replacement for Visio, Jim the mad scientist came back with these 4 products. These were his user experiences. Here were the pitfalls he saw. You would be surprised if you literally posted on your internal intranet or whatever your internal comm system is, looking for a mad scientist to test crazy application X. You will get people lining up at the door going, oh, thank God you're looking to nuke Visio. So really give that a try, because that will prevent them from just on a basic level going out and doing it on their own when you say very clearly, we're doing this for research and to see if there's a better tool for you. Come to us when you want to examine a better tool. You can be a mad scientist too.
Excellent. That actually, similarly, Michael and I, we recently held a webinar regarding looking for a project management tool versus a CRM tool and what that means, and what how challenging that can be. How some people confuse the tools as the same identity. And one of our examples that we gave was we were using a more robust tool before. So robust that it did everything. But the result of that was no one was using it, which was really interesting. So we actually did some research and found a simpler tool that you wasn't as feature rich, but it was much easier to use, and we find that everybody is now using it, which I think very similar to the Visio question, right? You're posting that and saying, hey, we need a mad scientist. Those people that are stomping their fists and saying, hey, this isn't working, might go out and try and like, wow, this looks really great, but there's no way I'm going to use this. I'm going back to Visio. So, that might be the solution too.
Yes, very, very much so. Actually, to me, a successful experiment around application usage is very often rejecting the application you're experimenting with. A great example from way back when in my early career, I was an email administrator at a place that was using Cover Your Eyes and Ears GroupWise.
Classic.
Yes, and the question was, what do we replace it with? So there was kind of an experiment run, really an evaluation, where we looked at Lotus Notes because it met all of the requirements. But no one thought, what was the user experience like? So going toward experimentation and rejecting what you're testing is completely acceptable. In fact, I would rather hear about a failed experiment than a successful one. If every experiment I run in terms of what applications, processes, or system to use is a success, there's something either wrong with my methodology, or everyone should follow me and listen to everything I say because they will get rich. And I doubt it's the second option.
One thing, too, that I wanted to point out or ask is, and this is, I think Miles brought this up as well, was, the sales force that's out there, right? That's, pounding at the phones, or pounding at your inbox, pounding away, yes, yes, yes. And, it's all about that story and trying to find that story. And sometimes the appeal, the sexiness of a product can be overwhelming, and very similar to you, Dave, mentioning earlier. This might be the preferred way of going, but it might not be the right way of choosing. And I wanted to ask some of your experiences or recommendations in finding a happy medium between, wow, this is going to revolutionize our organization for this problem or this need, but at the same time, not overwhelm, and at the same time just trying to accomplish that task and not let the cool factor overwhelm, and really just say, yes, this is it, this is what we need, and it also kind of fits some of that cool stuff too.
I've seen that there can be the issue of sort of application of the month, or flavor of the month. And everybody loved is it HipChat? I don't use it, but for talking to customers, and then everybody jumped onto something else. And one of the people that I deal with, they did find that there was this transition. Everybody loved one product 1 month, and then something new came out, and then everybody jumped on it. And I've seen it in some of sort of our systems that people have used, where you'll adopt something and it will be the nearest and dearest, and everybody loves it, and then all of a sudden something else pops up that does something slightly better. It has emojis as well as embedded GIFs. So yeah, we've got to use that. Thinking about the success criteria, what we've started to look at is what's the how can we exit the application? So, how can I adopt it? But if it's not working out or it gets superseded, how can I take my data out of there? Because nothing is forever. And we need to be fluid, and with license counts, can I deprovision accounts as well as and remove them from my licensing and my subscription as well as adding them. A lot of companies are getting Slack, even though I'm not a big Slack fan, does have a very nice billing model, I believe, where everybody on your domain can have access to it, but you only get billed for their actual usage. So you can provide them the tool, but if they're not using it because they've gone on vacation or it becomes a legacy product and everybody's moved to something else, it's still there. So it's sort of pay on demand as opposed to Adobe Creative Cloud. Let's say you have a downturn in your business and you have to lay off some designers, some creative people. You still have X number of Adobe Creative Cloud accounts, Adobe Creative Cloud accounts. You still have to pay for them until your renewal. So there's that is an ongoing issue.
Yeah, and kind of in the same vein as what Colin was just saying, platform exit or application exit really does need to be a serious consideration when doing requirements gathering, and also the ability to secure data liberation from your end users around sensitive information. I'm fairly lucky with where I am now. We have a share openly attitude internally. There's no secrets inside the organization, which is a wonderful thing. But I could very quickly imagine an environment, let's say it's a government organization, where there needs to be some siloing, and you need to be able to say, Bob can never pull this data out. Bob can throw all the data he wants in, he can never take it out. And if Bob goes away, his data stays with us, and we're not paying for Bob's usage anymore, just like Colin was kind of indicating with, if you have a downturn in your business and need to right size or rescale. So in terms of like the bundle, maybe I'm wrong, I haven't seen it yet, but like Creative Cloud, it's two real options. You have one app or all apps, and it's really just two price points. But if you have users that only need InDesign, Photoshop, and After Effects for some reason, there's no good fit there. So I think we're going to start seeing more elasticity in pricing on some of these bundles, depending on feature selection or usage of a specific app within a bundle. And I personally hate bringing up Microsoft in these things, but they are the prime example of an overly complicated pricing model and how that can impact a business. You have E1, E2, E3, or is E3 no longer around? Is it E4?
Have you not heard about E5? E5's new. It's everywhere.
Yeah, and I thought they were talking about types of internet connectivity in Europe at first, but I was wrong. And you get this portfolio of pricing that's about this big, and then you start asking the real questions like, well, you require me to true up once a year on my usage. If my usage drops in June and my true up is in September, am I still paying for that person throughout that year? No one has come back and said, yes, you don't have to pay for Bob anymore if he leaves in June at September. So it's a murky water in terms of both keeping your data secure and dealing with the price component.
Yeah, licensing management and the correct deprovisioning and provisioning and deprovisioning of accounts is a huge process, especially as you do go a la carte and you do have multiple systems. Not everything ties in smoothly into the Google Apps ecosystem or the marketplace. You do we've got a spreadsheet checklist when somebody leaves. A lot of it is automated through some tools, but we've got multiple different services that we need to go into and deprovision accounts. And if you find that a shadow system has been taken up by one of your departments and all of these users had been provisioned, are being paid for, but then they've left and the person who's stuck this on this service on a corporate credit card has never been deprovisioning those accounts. 2 years later, the auditors say, "Oh, why are you paying $20,000 a year for this service? Hamster runnersunited.com. What's that? What's that website? What's it doing?" They say, "Oh, that was some tool that people were playing with 2 years ago. It wasn't us. It was the developers." So.
Yeah, and kind of going a little further beyond what Colin was just saying, I've actually seen it go kind of the extreme other way as well, where you have this shadow adoption of, I'm going to pick on Smartsheets for a minute because I actually like their product, where Smartsheets was adopted in the dark from IT at one org I was consulting for, and then the problem was they had all of these people on separate teams that had related data that could not access each other's data in a meaningful way, and there was no good process for sucking all that data in and putting it into one cohesive Smartsheets account. So that's one of the other big risks we never really think about when we start looking at these things. It's already been adopted. None of these people talk to each other. How do we merge that data back?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the, I think one of the things, if you're thinking about making the choices between bundled and a la carte, which I think in a lot of ways is a placeholder in the conversation for the difference between giant company suites and tiny little startups building individual tools, is the security question. And like as a startupper, I know just how loosey-goosey we ran our shop. I can say that now that we've vaporized all of our shareholder value. Oh yeah. But if you look at the brand of these larger businesses and how much they have to lose if they get compromised or if they have user data stolen, when you look at the not millions but billions of dollars of investment by the large platform providers in their security profile. I mean, Eric Schmidt sits on the Pentagon board at this point for security, right? I mean, like there is an incredible investment being made, and if you look at, the littler shops, a good question if you're going to build on something that's an a la carte piece from a smaller place is you want to know what they're built on, right? Like you should get into the plumbing of going, okay, I know that you guys don't have 50 data centers around the world. Who are you borrowing those from, and do you actually know how to operate them in a way that's coherent, or are you just slapping this together in the back office, right? That security question is real and worth evaluating in the choice. The other thing is that pricing has gone Cambrian, right? Like there are every different conceivable model, on every different dimension that's imaginable. Like right now we track one of our competitors has 69,750 distinct pricing dimensions. Like that's a lot. Making the calculator, which I run, really sort of a pain in the neck, and it might make procurement folks a little confused. So a big part of what those shadow testers can be, if you've got, I like the idea of mad scientists out front, is you want to see what the actual bill looks like, right? Like I want to see what, like, do I get a programmatic bill? Can I query against that bill? But does it come out as a flat rate, or is it actually got a bunch of extra wiggly stuff on there? Like, some trial usage might go a long way in resolving some of those questions.
Yeah, and back in the vein of locally installed versus SaaS bundles or even individual, the security question is still front and center for the locally installed as well as the SaaS. It's not that there's no difference, it's that it's just different risk. So a great example, compromised password on a Creative Cloud account still gives somebody outside access to everything that's sunk from the local machine up to Creative Cloud. So two-factor, we can say two-factor tool blue in the face, but not everything supports it, especially when it's locally installed. So that's something to consider. Then there you have, again, Microsoft, where there's this kind of hybrid. You have your local install component of Office, but then there's a cloud version. So you're then having to consider the security both locally and in the SaaS model in the cloud. So I had enough headaches dealing with IT security, sorry, Matt, if you're listening, to kind of push me one way or the other. I didn't want to have to deal with both. So sometimes the local install, there were still security concerns, but it was a more manageable concern. And flip side, I use Google Apps at home. I've used it in almost every business I've been in for God knows how long, because I know Google has far better security experience and expertise for their cloud implementation, just a smidge, than I could possibly have with the team of 10 best people I've ever worked with dealing with a locally installed version of Exchange or Notes or GroupWise or Zimbra or any of the other email and collaboration platforms I've ever dealt with.
I really wish there was sort of like an international standards body where, every application had to have two-step verification, had to have, Google Apps OAuth or Microsoft Passport or SAML or Microsoft Passport's a very old thing, or whatever the new, Microsoft, portal, single sign-on login, that had, auditing. They do, this sort of itemized billing, but I'm finding a lot of the services that we're working with don't have any auditing or reporting tools. It's like, I'm paying you X number of $1,000s a year. I want to know, how many of my users are using your service, when they're logging in, what's their engagement time, because I can sort of get that information out of Google Apps, and if they do have a physical install of an application, there are some tools where you can, see how many times that application has been opened up on a computer and what its sort of runtime is. So you can gauge whether, yes, there is, value to that product, and this is why we should be having the budget to carry on, paying for it. It's just very strange the way that some of the fundamental architecture that we would want as system administrators isn't being built into these products.
Yeah, you cannot treat the corporate network as the crunchy outer shell that will defend you from all of evil. You have to imagine the fingers and toes of your users as the only shell that makes any kind of sense, right? And they've got to be able to defend themselves against the social engineering attack, where, I think a lot of the weaknesses that have been found in even corporate infrastructure systems today have largely been, the loose spots between the remote application, the local application. Tammy knows she's always supposed to type this password in because she's got it taped on the side of the wall, and if somebody from support calls her, she'll read that password right out to them, right? Like, Google standardized on unphishable SEC infectors. So we have a key that you poke that doesn't tell me a number, because you shouldn't tell me a number, because I could read it to somebody over the phone. Like, kind of an obvious hole that should get plugged up. But those kinds of, that stuff depends on a consistent forward pace of innovation around that technology. Because if, like I set up, I've got security nailed, and then the hackers figure out 4 different ways to screw with it, and then you're like, it'll only be 2 years until I do an update. Like, well, that's not going to roll, bro. Like, it's going to happen a little faster than that.
And it's, Miles is very right in the underlying sense that security is a never-ending arms race. And even if you take out one bad actor, so to speak, there's 15 kids graduating from middle school that are curious about how things work. And for those 15 kids that there are who are graduating middle school, there's 5 or 6 guys out there that know just enough to wreak havoc. And the view that your data center is this impenetrable fortress is beyond mistaken. Your data center is now really just a boundary line to your cloud instance. You don't really have that traditional data center model anymore that you can secure. You have this big pipe that goes to Compute Engine and OpenStack and everything else. So if those components of where your data lives gets compromised, your data center is compromised. So you really do need to vet the security of the SaaS solutions, those single applications, the platforms as a service you're using, and unfortunately, there's no ComScore Index or Nielsen rating for provider security. There's no, real audit that's third party that's universally accepted for this, and it's a real challenge when making a decision.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a bunch of richness for that kind of stuff at the data center tier, right? There's ISO 27001 and FISMA moderate and FedRAMP and PCI DSS level 3, and I spent a lot of time on this crap. So those are actually like super helpful structures for at least getting a very, very long checklist and making sure all of the boxes have been checked. And application vendors are still a mile away from that. There's some early stuff in ISO around application access security, and that's tied into some of the stuff they're doing kind of around holistic system security that's coming, that's in the 50,000 and 40,000 ranges. So take a look for those new specs. Those I think will be really helpful in it. But the industry has still got a long way to go.
And so it seems that a lot of this plays back to testing the applications that you're evaluating. Really test them for multiple. Maybe you test it for security. Ask the questions. Make the vendor uncomfortable, right? And I'm happy to say that because I know Google in particular welcomes it. They're like, bring it on. So I like that. So I have no problem saying that. Really ask those questions if you're taking a look. It seems like that's really important. But then in addition to that, educate. It seems Dave in particular was making a point that when you make that solution, it seems that you absolutely have to educate, and then educate again, and keep it fresh. And that's an expensive and challenging task. Go right ahead, Dave. You have some comments.
Yeah, no, it's especially a challenging task when you have an org like Google, and I'm going to say you're doing bad by doing great and making my past life very difficult. New features would roll out so quickly that training collateral became stale within hours, within a day, maybe 2 weeks at the tops. A great example, things like comment functionality in Google Drive for Google Docs, Google Sheets. That had so many enhancements rolled out over the past 2 years that in my past life, I literally stopped publishing training material as PDFs, as documents. And what I started doing is going, all right, I give up. Here is the link to what's new in Google Apps. And when you have questions that this doesn't cover, come to my office, get a free piece of candy, and I will explain it one-on-one until I get the trainers up to speed. And once the trainers are up to speed, I'll put up a new thing that says training session on new features on Thursday. And that's it. There was no other way to keep up with it.
Yeah, our weekly internal newsletter often, includes the latest and greatest thing that has been added to Google Apps for Work, and I've got a lot of old screencast videos that I've made of how to do things in Google, and really I should submit them to the Smithsonian so they can go in a museum piece, because there are some amazing old screenshots of how things used to look. But this is the problem with software as a service and everything working in the browser as opposed to a physical installation of an application. We have no control as the end users whether our users get the new UI. Often we get no notification and we find about it from our users that hey, this has changed. At least with a physical installation of an application, if you don't want to go to the new UI, you can keep it on the same.
Yeah, and in terms of the education and training component, that is one place where there is an advantage for the locally stored application, locally installed application, and that's quite frankly because it is so slow to change. In many respects, give you a great example. Final Cut on the Mac. There was one huge change with going to Final Cut X, and then it's been little drib and drab changes here and there. I didn't have to update a lot of training collateral. I wish I could say that for things like Google Drive Photos, in which like I said, I gave up. So if you are a small training department, my heart goes out to you on how to keep up with the pace of innovation, of feature rollout, things like that for bundled applications. Because quite frankly, sometimes a minor enhancement that comes out isn't even published front and center. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, spell check now checks for things in Spanish. And you have users going, muy bien, I don't get it. Why is this saying that's muy bien? So it is a challenge.
And I think it lends a hand really well to why it's so important to capture those people early on and say, look, we're making this investment and we're going to make this decision for the organization. So if we're going to, not only are we investing in a product, but we're investing in the future strategy and vision of utilizing this product. And so I think that's where this challenge of, I guess it's really not whether or not you're choosing between an a la carte software or a bundled application suite. It's really trying to find the best solution for the problem. And whether you might be a hybrid solution or not, you need to have staff involvement. You need to really find some champions, some screamers, some mad scientists, and get them involved so that we can to make it work better. And then when it is changing and is a problem and does break and needs to be replaced, it will be hopefully an easier transition. And that's one question I wanted to ask near the end of this is, there was several comments throughout this discussion, which has been awesome, by the way, about planning for change. Like you talked about data liberation, you talked about starting with the exit in mind. I'm curious about all of your thoughts on planning for the next application when you're making actually a decision for something brand new, essentially.
Well, I'll give an example, right? Like, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, Miles, please.
I'll give one quick example. You know, I think one of the places that's pretty fascinating for folks is, you know, there are whole new categories of tools, right? I mean, like, so like I built a social media analysis tool in a previous life. You know, I explained that thing to my dad, the landscaper. He's super confused. Like, you know, I go to my average IT shop and they go, I don't know what you're talking about either, right? Like, so one of the places that can be difficult is, you know, it's one thing when you're, you know, evaluating word processors, you feel like you have a relatively decent frame of reference and you've used those for a long time, and so you can put together a checklist on your own. It's important to get, you know, and I think these are kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time. There are reasonable analyst groups. I've been super impressed, frankly, with the analyst teams that back the investment and financial institutions, right? Like the people who figure out whether products are good for the people who want to invest in them are spending a little more time than the folks that are figuring out whether or not a product is good based on the folks who want to use them. So that lens can be an interesting way to evaluate an environment where you don't have existing usage. That's a place where I think people have a real trouble setting up a buy.
Yeah, in terms of planning for that change when you're just wrapping up, you know, that local change you're working on actively, whether it's, you know, a bundled application deployment or one app or SaaS versus, you know, local, whatever it is, I really think going through the experimentation on an ongoing basis and using the same process for experimenting over and over again. And I'm not saying what the experiment is, but how you document it, how you plan that experimentation phase, how you gather feedback. That should be kind of a distorted mirror on how you plan some of your projects for future deployments as well. It doesn't need to be as buttoned up as experimentation versus as buttoned up when you're doing big enterprise projects. But if there's enough similarity and you repeat experimenting over and over again, I got to deploy this app to these 5 users. I have to make sure data is compatible from the last tool used to the new tool. That will help a great deal. What it will also help you with is when you look at things through the lens of experimentation, versus just replacement. When a new type of tool comes along, that lens you've used for experimentation will work very well for assessing a new, never-seen-before thing. If you just constantly look at things with the mindset of, I am just replacing something, you will get run over by your users and by your business stakeholders. So really, experimenting helps planning for big new things.
Yeah, you just got to really keep a very open mind, because we don't know how people are going to be, operating. 5 years ago, 4 years ago, this conversation would have to have happened over, an ISDN, VC using, 20 grand Cisco gear or a Tandberg or a Life Size. Look how we've implemented. Miles joined most of this call from his car on his cell phone. I don't know what device he's using. Is it a tablet? I'm guessing.
It's a Nexus 5X.
Nexus 5X, yeah, and the image quality is perfect. I'm actually, I've got the Nexus 5, and it's a wonderful phone, and I use that for a lot of my work. Most of my end users don't have a computer at home. They all run their own personal lives off of a mobile or a tablet. The only computer they have is the work issued one for them. I think we've got to be less rigid, and we just got to be so much more flexible, and being very, very open, and working with companies, and telling management and finance, we need budget to play. We need time. When we're recruiting, we tell our IT engineers, this is your standard day, and this is what we want to be you spending your quiet afternoons is reading stuff, learning about new technologies, watching webinars, very much along the role that Google have done, with their 20%. Most Google good services have come from 20% play and reinvent times.
That's excellent. Just really quickly, the one little part there that you mentioned is, with Miles using his phone, I'm wondering if during this, using Dave's analogy of using the right lens, is asking where is this, who is the audience, and where is this going to be used, right? So if I'm an organization and I have a growing sales force, and I'm like, you know what, Rapportive is an awesome tool. It syncs up so well with Gmail. I can see your LinkedIn account, your Twitter feed. I got everything. Oh, this is great. Let's do this. And then, oh wait, I completely forgot after the investment that my entire sales staff is mobile, always in the car. And guess what? That tool only works on the desktop version. Jeez, I wish I did a pilot. Those types of accidents can happen if you're not, that's where the excitement, I think, might get out of control. Sorry, someone was about to say something.
Honestly, I forgot what I was going to say because I was too intent listening to you bring up the fact that so much of our workforce now is choosing to go completely mobile platform, and that does bring a different challenge with choosing bundled applications versus one-off a la carte applications. Google Apps, almost every Google app out, I should say all of the core applications at this point have a mobile component. It makes it a lot easier in assessing Google Apps versus Office 365 versus, for some reason, Lotus Notes or GroupWise or whatever else there is at this point. Because is there a mobile component? Yes. Do they have feature parity with their mobile versus their desktop implementation? No. How close are they? Like, these are very important questions that, as an IT professional, a technologist, people forget to ask. So, great example here would be, picking on IBM, but they're easy to pick on. Lotus Notes. There is no good mobile experience for that platform, like zero, and it's getting long in the tooth, kind of because of that. It was already shriveling on install base, but you look at Office 365 and Google Apps, there is a serious investment in both the mobile and the desktop. So when you're picking these a la cartes, call it Slack, is there a good mobile experience versus Skype's mobile experience? Needs to be asked, even if you're currently only in desktop-only land.
There's a quick piece there. We've been talking a lot about the trajectory of innovation for these platforms. And given that there are 3 billion people on the internet and we're going to put the 4th billion of them on here in the next couple of years, any business that's not trying to deliver their services on what is absolutely the dominant platform of the planet, which is the mobile phone, is out of their mind. And it should be the clearest signal to you that they have made terrible strategic choices, right? So that, like, they could tell you that they're doing all sorts of rocket science and dark magic, but if there isn't mobile stuff working, they're in for trouble, and that might be a clear signal for the future of their business. Just a pro tip.
And this would probably spawn a whole different argument over applications on mobile devices or investment in a proper mobile web interface. Because the one thing I hate is, as an Android user, is services only being iOS. And I hate installing apps on my phone. I've got very few apps. I find most of the sites and services I use have got a very good web interface. And with Chrome being able to do push notifications, if I want to get Facebook to pop up and tell me that somebody's done a comment on a post, just within being logged into Chrome, it can do that. So yeah, as those other emerging markets in Eastern Europe and APAC and India and China, as they all come online with entry-level Android phones or the iPhone SE, which has obviously been built and priced for those emerging markets, there does need to be that investment in the mobile web, and and that. Not to be application install driven, needs to be from the actual mobile Chrome browser. But I'm sure that's a whole other podcast.
Bring it on! I'm happy to have that one. That sounds fantastic. Just to shed a little light, before deciding on bundled versus a la carte, we were talking internally, should the conversation be installed application, whether it be on a mobile device or a desktop, versus a web application. Those conversations come up quite a bit too. What is the right path, and what are the questions that need to be asked? And I welcome having part 2 in the not so distant future to talk more about those questions. So if you guys are available, I won't put you on the spot now. I'll ask you after the fact, but that sounds like a great potential option. Oh, I love the thumbs up. Okay. Yeah.
Just give me some time to grow a beard. I'm feeling like an outsider.
Oh, there, look at that. All right. Oh, Miles, you talking? Sorry.
I just said the only way to really show that you're mobile first is to have the mobile second and the mobile third and the mobile fourth laying around, right?
Absolutely. That's true. It's so true. Sorry, I was about to tell you way too personal of a story. A little embarrassing. Anyway, great. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate everyone's time. Whenever I do these podcasts, I like to follow. The last question I like to ask is just tell me something exciting you're doing. It doesn't have to be relevant to the conversation we had today. I find you all very fascinating people, so I'd love to just hear about something exciting that you're working on or doing or moving towards. Start with Colin.
We're not really doing anything exciting. In the last 2 years, we've done all the exciting stuff. We've gone from Office 2010 to Office 2013. We've changed endpoint encryption. We changed our VPN connectivity. We instituted two-step verification on that. We've done a lot of environmental changes internally. We've invested a lot in Chromebox for meetings. We've done a lot of for the last 2 years we've been running. Now we're sort of taking a stroll and we're going back and we're looking at things, and we've built the house, but now we realize that there's a little bit of painting needs to be done here, and we're sort of tightening everything up. And we do a lot of internal pen testing, do a lot of patching, we do a lot of patching auditing, we do a lot of alerting. So we're really focusing on improving everything, and focusing on security. We're very worried about phishing. We've seen an increase of that. There's a lot of targeted phishing going on, and there was a story the other day that Mattel the toy company, almost lost 3 million or 3 billion because of a phishing email. So we're looking into that. We're spending a lot of time doing boring stuff, looking through logs. But it's exciting. It means that we've got a safer environment. Where we still are a walled infrastructure. We still do have a firewall. We still do have physical offices. And we're just sort of reinforcing our security. That's what we're spending our time on.
Excellent, Dave.
So my life has changed rather drastically in the past 6 months. Not that anyone watching or listening necessarily knows me from 6 months ago. I used to be an IT desk jockey, much like Colin, running a very, very large Google Apps instance for a nonprofit. And I've gone between how people collaborate and how people store the data they've collaborated on throughout my career. So now I'm at a storage startup where we're really kind of focused on making heads and tails of what's going on with your data. Where are the hot spots in your data usage? What render node on your render farm is really writing the most data out to your storage cluster? Beyond that, I've really changed how I look at technology from how I implement things, how do I build systems and processes, to how do I help people navigate that change from process and system A to their next process and platform. And that's part of why I went from being IT manager to customer success manager. I really have always enjoyed solving and building problems. And the problem I had, and I feel bad for Colin, but I know he loves what he does, is once you build a thing, that thing is there probably for a length of time that correlates to how much you've invested in it. So in my current role, I get to help you figure out how you're investing, where the integration points are with what you have on-prem or in the cloud, get you up and running, and then circle back before you're even done thinking about, oh wow, I finished that big project, and go, all right, what's next? What other things didn't we talk about that we can potentially integrate with without you spending more money? So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's great. And congratulations on the new move. And I'm still very jealous of the weather. Excellent. Miles.
Not that much crazy stuff. We did a demo last week where we can live update applications that are doing 10 million queries per second of functional load, which puts them at like just over the number of transactions a second that Visa handles worldwide. So that's kind of a fun thing. We built a system that lets you arbitrarily ad hoc query a petabyte. So it takes 40 computers on the order of 30 or 40 hours to just generate a random petabyte. Right? So we can sort that and screw around with it and do queries on it. So that's a fun, like, hello world demo. And then I built a robot last week using our Vision API. You point the camera at me and it says facial hair, because it can identify objects and pictures. Right? And then you tilt the camera a little bit and it says pet. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty clear.
I saw that on the next conference. I watched a lot of the webinar and they were demoing that. That was very cool.
Yeah, I built a dozen of them. They're super fun. They're a wild extension of being able to demonstrate to folks just how important machine learning is in all of this stuff. So right after you ask your SaaS vendor or your bundle vendor if they're fired up about mobile, and if they say no, you fire them. The next question is ask them if they're fired up about machine learning, and if they say no, wait 6 months, but then fire them. Right? Like it's that big of a shift. Eric Schmidt's quote from Next was that all of the next IPOs will be built on machine learning-based technology. And if you look at Google I/O from last year, it's basically identify interesting problem space, grab about a petabyte of stuff, and then apply machine learning to extract profit. So that is the way it's all going to go. It's going to be super fun.
Amazing stuff. I have no follow-up to that. That's just phenomenal all around. That's cool stuff. Really, again, to everyone, I really appreciate your time. I will absolutely start working on part 2. I think that to continue this conversation would be great. I really enjoyed your company, and I might see if I can find some others that would also be included to make this panel even a little larger, which would be a lot of fun. So again, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I'll be sharing this out to everyone, and we'll get this out there in the webosphere. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Great fun.